Hi, everybody. We're here at Mancini's, and
excuse me.
I was waiting for Tom.
Seeing all this time, I thought he had I thought his hearing was bad. His pacemaker just. My pager's going to go off. Your brother's having trouble.
It was one of the best timings that we could find. I'm watching him coming.
That was
come
too
on,
good.
2 more feet, 1 more feet.
That was too good. I fell right for it, man. I'm like, yeah. If my phone rings, that's saying, "Hey, go check on your brother."
Hi, everybody. John Sarver here, CKiW iRADIO 76, doing something new that we haven't done in a long time. This is, we're going to call this the 515 buy run or the 515 solo blast or whatever, but it's just going to be the 515 on location, because what happens is that we're bringing everything on location to the newsmakers that we can't wait to talk more to. And in this situation, we'd kind of go, well, this gentleman needs no introduction, you know, so we won't. Anyway, so how about, no. Jim Tignanelli and Tom Tignanelli are Mopar royalty, if they're not drag racing royalty by this time. You should know more about them, and that's what, hopefully at the end of this show, you will know more about them. They are, without doubt, in drag racing, if you've never heard of them, you have benefited by their technology and their wisdom, especially when it comes to Chrysler Mobiles. Now, what happens was, a quick little story in the backstory is, and we use this story a lot, you know, it's kind of like having a local band had a #1 hit, and then somehow they kind of went away somewhere, and now in 2023 they're coming back and, God, kicking down the door, you know, and we can't wait to hear them. So you should hear this story. It is fascinating on so many different levels. We had Jim Tignanelli on the 515 on the audio version of it, and you probably have seen his brother Tom with us over on the Eyes On with Elliot, you know, who we tip our hats to Elliot. No Elliot, none of this place. So the cool thing is that the Tignanelli brothers have gave us permission to come into their secret location, which we can't tell you on Grossbeck, you know, and behind us are some of the most fascinating and historical race cars. Would you think so, Jim?
One, absolutely, for sure. The other one, we're trying to make history. But
you know, tell us about this car, about the Barracuda, because everybody's seen Fatso. But what we should probably do is say Fatso is a
64 Dodge, nostalgia superstock. It's basically has all of the measurements of a superstock car, but you know, they allow you a little more to try to make them last longer. They allow you some engine things that you can do. But it's a carbureted car with gasoline, you know.
So the difference between that and the Barracuda behind us?
This because of the newer technology, it's probably more dependable, the new car. The old car required a lot of maintenance, This car here, you could probably go all year long, really just, you know, adjust the valves one time, and if you don't screw up, it should be good all year.
I mean, the newer car being this one?
This car here, now the car behind us.
Love the Barracuda. Fastback 68?
Yes.
68.
No, it's an amazing car, and it's actually technologically cool even today.
Because?
Well, because it's got some weird things done to it. But the real, the thing in that car, what you need to know between the two, is this car here, we had to make adjustments on it so we could change the transmission like in 15 minutes, because we would put 2 or 3 transmissions on a weekend in this car. That was part of daily maintenance on that car. Clutches, because everything was heavier. You know, the materials were heavier and they were not as good. This car here would probably go all year and maybe tune up the transmission one time. I mean, maybe hundreds of runs. And that car there, 5 or 6 runs on a weekend, we were working. So, and you know, it had cast iron cylinder heads, these new things. Everything is so light and so perfectly manufactured that that was perfect 50 years ago. But the new cars they cost more, but they're like your own personal car. We used to do valve jobs on personal cars, 35,000 miles. Now you go 100,000, you don't even put spark plugs in them.
Well, it's just like when anybody's car got to 75,000, you go, well, we should sell the old beast.
Yeah, we wouldn't get 25,000 miles on a set of tires. Now my pickup truck will go 100,000 miles on a set of tires. Yep. It's just better stuff. You pay more, but they're better.
Why did you have the Barracuda? I mean, you were doing you know, you like Fatso. I mean, of all the cars you ever drove, I mean, because let's think, you had the Fatso, and we should probably say why Fatso is Fatso.
It just looks fat. It's sort of like, what is that old commercial? Does this make me look fat? Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
But in real life, this is the Barracuda heavier than?
No, it's lighter because it just is. But,
Okay.
That car weighs right around 3,000 pounds without a driver. This is probably, I don't even want to tell you, but it's a little heavier than that.
All right. Engines in both cars are?
Well, this is an aftermarket Chrysler engine. I mean, it's a wedge. That's a Hemi. But like this is aluminum. That's not. I mean, there was no aluminum Hemis in those days, you know. So, and again, that's weight. But it gives you an idea. This car has an all cast iron power plant, and it weighs significantly less than this car, which has got an all aluminum one. It's just, you know, we looked harder and further and deeper to make it light.
You know, why, if I was going to say, you loved campaigning this car.
I do.
I mean, you would do this car more than this one, or say the Arrow.
Well, I never got to drive the Arrow, but I have a real dream of driving this car again, but probably not in a year-long competitive thing. And in fact, I'll tell you, it won't happen because it's too maintenance, you know, necessary, and I don't want to turn it into that car. This is a real 1968 Hemi Cuda, and to me, to change it, and believe me, the ones that run now, the Hearst Hemi shootouts, and they're magnificent cars. But for me to make ours like that would mean, to me, spoiling an original car. This is sort of like the masterpiece. You wouldn't want to change the outfit on, on Who's the Gal, in the movie there.
Her.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain things that just are better left alone. We could make it run. We could make it better than it was. But, to make it like those, you got to change engines and cylinder heads. I just don't want to do that. That car's a masterpiece.
It's period correct?
It is. It really is.
And it's going to stay that way.
And I'm telling you, when we take it places, that's the attraction to that car, is people remember it. And when people look at it, the things they see on this car, even the great racers of today, when they see things on this car, one of two things happens. They're impressed that we did that 50 years ago. Or they look at it and they say, this is how it used to be. That they're seeing things that people don't see anymore. To me, to make that one under the hood look like one of the new ones is just putting you in a group of 50 instead of a group of one.
So you have Fatso.
Yeah.
Which is a
64 Dodge.
Okay. You have the Plymouth Barracuda.
Yep.
At one time you had the Arrow, but then again, there were so many other cars in between all that.
Yep. Yeah, we had quite a few. But in those days, you were working at the gas station to go racing. This is what we did. That was our job. And so when you wanted to go to the next car, you were almost compelled to sell what you had. We didn't have the ability to own two. We did have two, a lot. We had a 63 and a 64, wonderful 64 Plymouth. Then we had the 64 in this car, which I drove both of. They were both stick cars, wonderful cars to drive, really just so much fun, and you give everybody a head start. And for the guys listening that have the Super A cars, the quicker cars in the category, there's nothing more thrilling than sitting there and watching you get into high gear and then knowing that you're looking back to wonder where I'm at and know I'm going to catch you. We won a lot of races, and it was a lot of fun.
Best year in drag racing was what? I should say for you.
I would say for me, 73 or 75.
Because?
We went to a lot of national events, and we were very competitive. We would never go west of the Mississippi, basically. We didn't have that. Well, we would go to Tulsa back when Tom was driving. That's where the World Finals were. But when I was driving, we got to the Spring Nationals, the Summer Nationals. We went to Quebec. But basically, we were like, one or two time zones. We didn't get to the West Coast. Never did. And in both of those years, the first year I won, a big trophy. The second year, the 75, I actually won. I think that's the first year of the Wally, which was kind of cool. So to me, and I drove just wonderful race cars those 2 years. This car and the 64 car in 75, the 64 and the 63 in 73. Wonderful cars to drive. And
63.
we had a 63 Max Wedge car. That's what I started in 1971. And it was an aluminum car, real race car, one of the original 50 of those cars. And it was Max Wedge, cross ram, aluminum fenders, aluminum doors, aluminum bumpers. That was a factory car. Wonderful car. And God, it's one of those where everybody looks back and says, geez, I wish I'd never sold that. There's a couple cars there that, if I was independently wealthy, I would still have. And it'd probably take an independently wealthy guy to buy them back. I mean, they are very special cars to me and to the people that own them.
But you know what we should do, though? Since this is going to be a comprehensive story of not only the Shadowwood Race Team, but the family of the Tignanellis, we should probably start in the very beginning,
That's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm flattered that anyone would want to hear it because I'm very proud of our family and most proud of our dad, who I think really there would be no Shadowwoods, there would probably be no drag race program, but for the dad we were blessed with, and the mom, because the mom, she had to tolerate all of this. You got three
drag racers.
Yeah, you got three guys in there that that are trying to spend money on a set of pistons or connecting rods, and you got Ma trying to get it for Formica countertops. But
and who would win out?
well, she did get her countertops, but she had to go to job to get her to work. She really did. She went to work in January of '63 to get our first color TV, and she worked there for 25 years because every time she had Formica countertops, and it was, our ma paid her own way, whatever she wanted. And but she went to work for one project, a TV, and worked 25 years.
Wow! And by the time the color TV came out, you guys were on the West Coast.
And by that time, the TVs cost half as much and were twice as good. But she was a perfect mom that we had. Our dad. Well, I don't want to really get too far ahead of you. You want to know the beginning of it.
Yeah, because really, your dad is the whole part of, he obviously was fabricating early in his life.
He was. Yeah.
I mean, we saw a picture of his own go-kart.
Yeah, with no motor in it. He actually built his first car. We have that picture floating around. We think he was about 12. And he painted it black and white. And our cars will always be black and white. And I mean, these paint jobs were his design, but he's a black and white guy, and and it has his dad's belt holding the hood down, because the old race cars, they used leather belts to hold the hood down.
Yeah.
And it's got bicycle tires on it, and what thrills me about it is when you look at that picture, he has some, I don't know what he's wearing for a helmet with these goggles. I don't know where it came from. But he has the same look in his eye that he had, I think, the last 3 weeks I knew him. And he lived 99 years. And he never changed who he was. He was just a perfect guy. But that little car there, I think, is an indication. He quit school in the 8th grade. And he went to what was called George Washington Trade School in Detroit, which would be a trade school like you would have today, where you learn a skill or a trade.
And what years were this?
He was born in 18. I think he went to the 8th grade, so he would have been about 15. So probably, maybe say in 1932 or 3.
Okay, so pre-war.
So, oh yeah. And he went to Washington Trade School and learned to be a mechanic, because that's what he was going to do. And he worked on a lot of cars in those days, and that was going to be his career. And so he got out of there, and he went to work for Packard Motor Company, and that was really cool because he became a body man at Packard's, which he was wonderfully skilled, and probably people sought out his lead work when he was in his 80s. I mean, I remember him doing
80s.
Oh yeah, I remember him doing a '57 Chevrolet for a guy that was nearly perfect, and he heard about Dad, and he wanted the repairs to be done with lead. And lead, we're all gonna die. My dad lived almost 99 years, just a couple weeks short, and seriously, he operated with lead. He painted with lacquer thinner, 2-part paints, Bondo dust. He did everything that they say will kill you, and he was never sick. 3 weeks of his life, in the last 3, he kind of just ran out of gas. Never went to the hospital. He just kind of petered out.
Ran out of gas?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, you hear a motor sputter, and we could see it. But
Yeah, but I mean, look at everything that he did. I mean, he started from there, fabricating. Now, for those who don't know, if you were part of a Packard, and Packard was and I don't know why we have to explain
the Popes
it.
had Packards, the Czars had Packards.
Yeah, it was
the car.
Packards were Rolls-Royce Plus. Rolls-Royce would be like the cheap version of a Packard. If you had a Packard, movie stars had Packards.
Yep.
You're right. Kings and queens had Packards. They were like
Because you could get your car. You could
Yes,
get
very
your
customized.
car.
Yeah.
And our dad was the body man, and one of the things I didn't know for many years, I mean, I saw the things he'd do with an acetylene torch and a ball peen hammer and a little dolly, and he stretch steel and do magical things, and then put a little lead on it and make it perfect. But I happened to be at a Packard museum down in Fort Lauderdale, and while I was down there, they had these Packards with these fancy fenders, and the really cool people had these, where the side-mounted tires in the fender, it had the scallop too, and it was all rounded perfect. And I looked at it, and I actually sent a picture of it to my dad, and I said, hey, because he was there 30, 37, 38, and 39, 1937, 38, and 39. And I sent it to him, and he says, that's Clark Gable's car. And he says, I don't know if I made those fenders, but there were only 6 of us in the whole factory that made the front fenders. And they're all hand formed perfectly. And that was our dad. I mean, and this is, that's the kind of stuff he could do that really it's a skill that very few people ever had. And as he grew older, he never lost the skill. And then after that, he and his 2 brothers went in the military. My dad was a Army Air Corps, which is the Air Force before there was an Air Force. And he was a pilot and a mechanic, and he was just a magical guy. And when they came back, all 3 came back. They were there 42 to 46. And my dad, Bob, and his brother Ernie and Joe. And they pooled their resources and bought a little gas station down on Fisher and Gratiot, which is, when you lived on the east side of Detroit like we did, that was over there, but now it's probably
Fisher and Gratiot.
Yeah, probably not a place you want to hang around right now. But,
Okay.
but they bought this little gas station. Actually, the building existed until just a couple of years ago. I tried to buy the property, but you have to excavate about 40 feet down, because in those days, you dumped antifreeze in the dirt, so it was out of reach. But they bought this little gas station in a busy part of town, and right next door, actually the Giacalonis owned the building next door, which I don't know if you know the Giacalonis, but they became fast friends. Never any more than that, but he started working on their cars and trucks, and
Worked on the Giacalonis car?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked on his car, and as years went on, I mean, I did actually, and he paid good. So,
as long as he liked your stuff.
You couldn't get that job for me. But they were in that little gas station, just a little corner place, and it was the usual, 2 bays, and I remember it had a medic sign on the front, that what you see on the doctor's office with the medic, the serpent or whatever it is. And they had that on the front. It was really cool, and they were there from 46 till about 50. And then they moved to a place on 8 Mile and Harper, which is called Harper Vernier Service, Sunoco. But the whole goal was to build a shop. And in December of 58, so they were only in those 2 places maybe 5 years each. When they went to, they bought 13 acres in Roseville, which is unbelievable. No, I'm sorry, 10 acres on 13 Mile Road, excuse me. And they built the gas station far enough north of the intersection that actually when they were about ready to go belly up, they were able to sell the bottom half of it, and that's where the Georgian Inn Hotel and a bowling alley went.
Okay, right.
Which all these things
kind of all come together, and
Yeah.
you'll see in just a few minutes how this all works.
Get the old 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We got 20 degrees. You know, I mean, I can't believe people want to hear all of it, but that's cool.
Everything goes from this iconic gas station that if you were on the east side, if you were ever on Gratiot, you passed it 100 million times.
Right.
You know, not knowing the drag racing royalty, the drag racing history, the stuff that was coming out of this place. You thought it was just a basic Sunoco station or whatever station it was at the time.
It was the first 3-bay Sunoco station anywhere, and that was Sunoco's idea. This 3-bay gas station. Well, you know, they were all 2 prior to that, and then my dad and his brothers built 4 more bays, so it was like this.
Yeah, right.
And those 4 were 2 cars deep, had a wheel alignment pit in the ground, which was a big deal in those days. But the really cool thing
Wheel
was,
alignment pit.
well, because the guy worked on the car from underneath. That's how they aligned your wheels. All the machinery was in the ground. You know, like you drove onto a ramp.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
when you get these quick oil changes.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That type of a thing. And then, you know, Dad was always the painter. He was always painting in primitive ways and locations. And so they built a spray booth on the back, and it was just technologically astute. It was a concrete block. It had a whole house filter, you know, like you put in your attic to cool a house. And the doors had furnace filters in them. So you would suck air through the door filters and blow it out the ceiling. And that was the extent of the breathing apparatus in there.
And you were this far away from other people's homes, right?
Oh, yeah, actually, well, I guess we'll talk about the Logghes at some point, but I can tell you Gene's house was right in the line of fire there. Maybe that's what got us all those jobs. I don't know.
Because you would think about it, now you have air scrubbers, you know, you got downdrafts, you got people with like these, you know, incredible masks with air that goes through it and all that stuff. There's a wonderful story about your dad when he's painting, dips the rag in water, let's go.
It's absolutely true. And he was painting, I mean, when he got around to doing some of these chassis, he was using this 2-part boat paint, which is it's panther water. I mean, it's a murder weapon. But I never saw my dad wear a breathing mask. I saw him wear it to maybe San Bondo, but I never saw him paint it. He'd take a wet rag, a gas station rag, the old orange rag, and stick it in water, put it around his face, wrap his face up with masking tape, and put his hat on. Whoever the last guy that bought him, my dad wore baseball caps every day, and whatever one he had on was the last one he got until you gave him the next one. And he had a pair of coveralls, you know, like those old summers, you know, gas station coveralls that are all one piece.
One piece, yeah.
And whatever, he had this piercing whistle, and when he needed, we would put water on the floor to keep the dust down. And when he would paint, when he got to where he couldn't see, he would whistle, and that meant turn the fan on and suck all the stuff out. And then when it was clear enough, he whistled again. We were forbidden from opening the door because in those days the paints didn't dry like they do now. And he was magical. But I mean, he was very talented, and he never got sick, and he never whined about anything. But he would paint these cars with the Logghes. Now, you know, I guess I got to tell you where the name came
Logghe
from.
chassis, yeah.
But I got to tell you the name Shadowoods here because, you know, it seems like now that we've gotten more interest in it, I guess I blame you for all that. You know, hey, where did the name come from? You know, like, because all names come from some way.
Yeah.
You know, and here the real irony of it. When I tell people this, I think sometimes they're like, "You got to be kidding me!" Oh, I'm dreaming about where's that name from? Because it's got a cool sound to it.
Yeah, it does.
It was the corner of the gas station was on Gratiot and Shadowoods. It's the honest truth. I mean, actually, when we moved there, before it became the 7-bay place, it was Gratiot Shadowoods service. Just like we had Harper Vernier service, Gratiot Fisher service, was Gratiot Shadowoods service. That was the name of the side street, and I've never been so happy to know that our dad didn't move on to a corner, you know, called Louise or something.
Bean Brain, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, and to this day, I mean, it's you know, still there. And in that sub, which was the nicest subdivision in Roseville at the time, we had Gene Logghe, Ron Logghe, and Morris, their dad, Logghe. They all lived right there. And we were first gas station out there. I mean, when he built that place, Gratiot was 2 lanes. There was no I-94 coming in there, and we were full service. So I mean, I would hitchhike from Denby High School out there after school. That's how I got to work, and then finally he gave me a '56 Ford panel truck to drive back and forth.
Thanks, Dad.
Because it was taking too much time for people to pick me up, apparently. And I was actually driving back and forth in the 8th grade with that '56 Ford, 312 cubic, has 3 2-barrels, 3-speed. It was the coolest car, which I
3 2-barrels?
3 2-barrels.
So this isn't a factory stock.
No, it was cool, man. It was really cool, but I couldn't park by the school because nobody was able to know that I was driving because I didn't have a license yet. So.
How old were you?
I was about, it was 8th grade, probably about 14 or 15 maybe.
8th grade, and you were hitchhiking back to go to work?
Oh, yeah. Oh, before that, actually. He moved there in '59. I would have been 8 or 9 years old. I was probably hitchhiking there about 12 years old. And because our mom was at work, paying for my countertops.
See how this all comes around? Yep.
Before I left for work, she would have a note on the table, put in 2 cups of water, clean the carrots, clean the potatoes, do this, and this, cup of whatever, put it in the oven at 350, and then I would go to work, and it would sit in there and cook until Mom came home.
The original cooker.
And in the oven, and then when she'd come home, she'd put it in the front seat of her car and drive to the gas station. That's where we ate dinner.
How far away was your house from?
It was about, we lived off 7 Mile in Gratiot, and this was 13 miles, so like 6, 7 miles.
But still 2 lanes at that time.
Yeah, well, when you got north of 8 Mile, it was rural up there. I mean, it really was. There was no I-94. You took Gratiot all the way to Port Huron. That was the highway.
God, so you saw the building of, say, Macomb Mall.
Oh, yeah, that was later, yeah. Oddly enough about I-94, if you need another Bob story, when he was in Harper Vernier, the second gas station, they were digging the ditch to put I-94 north from 8 Mile. It used to stop at 8 Mile in the city of Detroit. And they were trying to dig that ditch to get all the way, which ended up in front of Gratiot and Shadowoods.
Funny enough how that worked.
We didn't know that though. And he had a wrecker, or a dump truck, I'm sorry, and they would pay you $15 if you drive in there and let them load you up. You had to drive it to Metropolitan Beach and dump the dirt. And probably 59 or 60, right after, he moved to that place in December '58, it might have been '58. He got carbon monoxide poisoning in his wrecker, or his dump truck, because he had no exhaust pipe on it. And we went to what was called Women's Hospital at the time. It's Hutzel now, down in the medical center. And they were giving him the last rites. He was in an oxygen tent. And I remember we went in there, we were never going to see him again. And you know what? Yeah, he lived another, I don't know, 50, 60 years. But he almost killed himself with carbon monoxide poisoning.
And, getting 94 past you, nice.
But the end of that road was the Shadowwoods and Gratiot.
Funny how that worked out?
I don't know, there's your 20 degrees now, But that's where he painted cars in that booth, and that's because of the Logghes, I would say, living there. And we were a full-service gas station, so everybody bought their gas there that lived there.
Yeah.
That just became the connection that got us really much of this, because...
tell the folks what the Logghes, because the folks who do know about drag racing, Logghes, it is quite the name.
Oh, yeah. I mean, wonderful guys, wonderful family, and very talented. And their shop, when they were really a Logghe stamping company, was a place that made materials. Mm-hmm. And we were just north of 13 Mile, and they were just south of 13 Mile. I'd say half a mile apart from the gas station to Logghes. And they lived behind us. And then when they started making the chassis, they started there and ultimately moved on to 13 Mile Road, about a mile west of us. But they were built, when they started building those chassis, to get them painted in a way that would be durable, spilling fuel on.
Here comes the 6th degree, here we go.
I'm not sure if we've gone 25 already, but they came to Dad and said, can you paint one of these chassis? And it was chrome moly pipe, like you're used to seeing even today. And he would hang it from welding rods in the spray booth, because he couldn't set it on anything. So we had these little things holding on the sides. And then we would all go in there with emery cloth and all those pipes, because you're doing round pipes and you're doing corners and stuff, and it's got to be clean. and then we'd wash it with lacquer thinner, and then he'd throw us out. And the paint was epoxy. It was a 2-part paint that they used on boat bottoms. You know, like when you poured them together, it turned into a brick. So you had to get it done. And they only had about 10 colors. And these guys that were building these cars, these funny cars, because this is right after now the 66, 67 altered wheelbase cars like we're working on now, where they went to the flip tops. You know, the Don Nicholson and the Comet, and those guys. And those were all Logghe chassis. I don't know there was a funny car out there for 10 years that didn't have a Logghe chassis, and they all came out of 13 Mile. And I'd say the overwhelming majority didn't leave without being painted by our dad. And
how do they transport that from? I mean, because Logghe chassis are not small. I mean, they're size of, you know, a flop. So the kind of thing went from AFX cars to funny cars that we've seen today.
The altered wheelbase.
Close to today.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and so these chassis were square, you know. I mean, technically cool for the time.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
You know, when you look back now.
But if you had a funny car, though, you had no other choice of all the entire world.
They had coilover shocks, which Logghe's made, and a straight axle, and that was the adjustment, the shocks, and they all came out of. I can't say there's an exception, but overwhelming majority of them came out of the gas station.
So they would call up your dad and say, "Look, we got 3 more chassis coming. We're going to drop them off in your front door."
Yeah, they bring them on a flat trailer. You just pull them up, and we pick them up. I mean, they didn't weigh anything. And take them in, and one at a time, and paint them whatever color the guy wanted, you know, based on whatever his program was going to look like. But they only had like blue, green, yellow.
Yeah,
red,
I was going to say, yeah.
They didn't have more. I don't think they had 10 colors.
And he's shooting it with marine paint. It's kind of like Imran. If you ever shot that stuff,
it was Imran.
Wow.
Nasty, nasty, nasty.
Yeah, and hurried up and hardened, and if you weren't quick enough, you threw away your gun.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, he only had the one gun. You know, I mean, he never. My dad's gun lasted forever. But
one gun?
Yeah, oh yeah.
What did he have? A Find a Velvis?
Yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he never had a downdraft gun in his life. You know, these new ones with the paint dripping down.
Yeah, right.
He had the big tin can, and he would carry a gas station rag with lacquer thinner on it in his hand, and like every time he'd get through Spain, he'd go. That's how he cleaned the nozzle, and then he'd get going again. And he had a perfect. I don't think you can teach this. The paint jobs now, because of the equipment and the materials are so good. I think there's a lot of great painters, but I think average guys became better because of the equipment. Where he had a can of black and a can of silver when he was doing your car, and that's how he tended to, because there was no computer generated, you know.
He eyeballed it?
Oh yeah, and he was really good at it, and did a lot of cars for people, a lot of used cars. But anyway, the Logghe thing came in there. I think it was by chance, you know, hey, do you want to do this? Well, yeah, of course. And
but how would they know? Because they could smell all the paint going in their backyard?
Maybe, I don't know. But, you know, they came in the gas station. They were customers, you know, and I think they just figured it out. And Dad was painting cars. You know, one of those Brooks that you get when you would go to the dealer and they'd have the new Buick Sabre, you know, Century. Those cars were painted with like paint that washed off. And Dad would do the same Buick 3 different colors, send it down, vinyl top and everything, and they'd bring it back, change it from blue to green. It was, so the Logghes knew these things that he was doing. I mean, it was, you couldn't help but get noticed. And when when Tom got through the 67 season with the altered wheelbase car, there was this urgency to try to get into one of these flip-top cars. And so Dad told Logghe's, I'll paint the next 10 for free. I mean, they were like $150 a piece or something. I'll paint the next 10 for free, and then we'll want a free chassis. And that was Tom's first funny car, was that chassis. And that was the UFO Volume 2, because the UFO originally was a 65 steel altered wheelbase car. And when he made that car, Tom bought the body from Romeo Palomides, I can't forget that name. He lived in Chicago, and the car was really heavy, so it was like outdated, but it was a 68 Charger. And beautiful. I still think it's a beautifully styled car. And Dad candy apple, that was a magnificent car. And had orange chassis. I mean, it was cool.
Your dad candy appled in basically a cement slab floor.
Oh yeah.
With with a little bit of filtering, a wet rag in his face. What kind of lighting did he have? Shop lighting?
Yeah, a couple of fluorescents, I think. And I'll tell you, it was beautiful though. He did beautiful stuff, I mean, he just knew how to paint.
I mean, it's amazing that he could see, because if there's no air movement and all that, that spray all over the place.
He was good, and then that kind of led to the funny car guys in those days were mostly West Coast or East Coast guys, and in the summertime they looked for a place to headquarter in the middle of the country. They didn't have these Indianapolis shops like everybody has now.
Yeah,
magnificent. These were guys that were building cars on the back of their truck. I mean, they were like us, only, they got to the next step. But they were really, there was a lot of work, changing motors and things. You see these stories, and we were there changing things in motel parking lots. You heard the hotel Holiday Inn Hood story. I mean, these guys would stay in the Georgian Inn, which was that hotel right next to the gas station, on the other side of the brick wall. My dad's old piece of property. And they stayed there for like 2 months. They'd go to the Summer Nationals in New Jersey and come back. They'd go to the, here and come back. This was the headquarters. And because Logghe was there, and Al Bergeur was there, and Al, who continues to be a great friend, very talented, the most talented tin guy ever. And he did the interiors. Logghe's fixed the chassis, and the cars came into the shop, and Dad would fix a crack or a hole or whatever had happened, or change the color from yellow to white or whatever they wanted, and then the cars left.
Well, it's amazing how many race cars your dad did, but he did besides race cars. I mean, he did like evidently just the run-of-the-mill cars that needed some kind of bodywork.
Oh yeah, we did. I used to take a truck and go down and pick cars up from like different dealerships, that he would bring in, and we'd do 3 cars. I mean, fix the fenders, fix the doors. No, he was in business, but the race car stuff would not have kept him full, but it kept him talented, it kept him noticed. But then the race car bodies got to where he started painting whole cars. The problem was, it's not a problem, they all liked my dad.
Gee, why?
I mean, and these
Gee,
guys,
why not? I should say.
These guys that that you would read about or see would come in there, and just push you out aside, and they wanted to go talk to Bob. Here's Bob here. It's Bob here. It's Bob here. Shirley Muldowney, I think she would have run away with my dad. My mom might have put up a fight, but
while she was working for that Formica top.
Yeah. All those guys. I have to tell you, John, the coolest part, if I look back on our life, I mean, this is fun, but the coolest part of that whole period there was that in the third bay of the gas station, which is the one where there's no hoist. Every gas station's got a hoist, and then one with a sewer.
Okay.
And in that third bay was half the Hall of Fames in the country of automotive stuff. I mean, and we never knew that would happen. I mean, the Perdomes, the McEwens, Bruce Larson, the Mancinis, Tedders, Pancho Rendon. I mean, God, we ate a million of his tacos. That third bay of the gas station, Shirley Muldowney, Conrad Coletta. My dad used to pick on him all the time.
Conrad.
Oh yeah, we love Conrad, still do. It was my dad used to say, "There's no such thing as a one-eyed jet pilot." Conrad's got one bad eye. My dad was a pilot. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. And now Conrad's got the biggest fleet of 747s in the world. He's bigger than Delta. And but he was in the gas station. These guys would come in. And we were just people, I don't remember. As I look back now, I think, oh man, when I went to one of the Hall of Fames that I think it was the Mopar one, and I looked at the roster who's in there, I was like, every one of these guys, not everyone, a huge percentage of them, stood in the third bay of the gas station while I fried bologna and onions. I mean, we were just people, and we all had to go to work, and we were just blessed to be around these guys. And fortunately, they still think we were okay. I mean, we see them from time to time, and I guess we're a bit of a fond memory back there.
But is that what everybody on their way up? Because what era are we talking about? 60s, 70s, 50s?
This would have been probably from probably 68 or 69 and I would say probably into 1980, probably all of the 70s for sure.
Well, that's when kind of the golden age of drag racing was still flourishing.
Well, I know they built a fuel dragster for Dick Logghe in '75 and went to the Winter Nationals. It says Shadowoods on the side. It's a cool car, actually. Had this paint job on. Our dad painted it. Tom assembled it.
We should probably go to, here's another one of the stop points. The Shadowoods, we know that this is an incredibly iconic look.
It is.
You know, all right, so the Shadowoods letters look the way they do because
Dad says you always seek to go forward.
And that's why
our letters always, like you see guys, because it's the wind blowing them back, that's from there, you just keep challenging, you keep charging forward. So everything on our car, everything has always gone forward.
And the black and white scheme was his also, too, right?
That was his colors. And then this red that you see, and it was like 65 or 6 Ford Mustang. It was called Poppy Red. And it's, to some it's sort of an orange. Tom ended up painting our Hemi engines that color. We had unique looking Hemi engines because it was Dad's Poppy Red, But that's where that came from. And the checkerboard and all that that's just the old man thing, that was just him. I mean, I don't know. We just left him alone, and that's what he did.
Yeah, but this is difficult to do. This isn't a decal. Really this isn't a wrap.
No, you're right.
Especially if you're in one booth with some kind of shop lighting.
And masking tape. And not even the masking tape you have nowadays, which,
they're quick rip.
Pretty nice. We've been using old white masking tape. And the funny thing about those squares, and you really have to, nobody really cares to look at them, and they don't have to. But
yeah, you do.
But when you look at them, they're all the exact same size. And when you put one against something else, usually the tape's got to be on one side or the other, And it's easy to make a skin like that, and guys do, and they do beautiful jobs. But Dad's squares, the white one will fit on the black one will fit on the white one, and that's really, that means every one you did, the tape had to go on this side or this side. I know it sounds silly, but that's how he did things.
Yeah, but still, that's difficult as Hades, especially back then. I mean, I'm thinking he didn't have any lasers or computers to help him with?
No, I think the only tool that he actually used was he would bring my mother's reading glasses. And they were about this big, like
a windshield?
Because, he never wore glasses his whole life. Never lost a tooth. I mean, the guy was healthy as could be. But he would bring Ma's glasses, and they'd be stuck in his pocket, and, and that was what he used. But he'd make them out of a piece of cardboard. It's very primitive.
He made them out of cardboard, shot it, changed and shot it.
No, he made the cardboard to put the tape down so that everyone was exactly the same size. The cardboard was a template for the tape. And then he would tape fill it all in. I could show you the hood that he did for Tom's Arrow. I'll send you a picture of it, I guess. You can't believe this hood.
Why?
Nobody could do this. You remember the screaming chicken on the Firebird?
Yeah.
Dad did an arrow for Tom's Plymouth Arrow, and it's going forward naturally. And it's hundreds of stripes coming together like this. I'm telling you, they are hairs, and they all come together, and that's all taped, and then he pinstriped it himself. It's unbelievable. The hood's in my garage, actually. Sam wasn't going to throw it out. That's the one thing he was going to throw out. Actually, I intercepted. But it's unbelievable. I'll send you a picture of it, or if you want. But it's that hood is unbelievable, and that's old Bob.
See, and there's so many different things. As you know, we're going to be jumping. We're not going to go chronologically. I mean, because really, when you're sitting with us right now, we're like two Dutch uncles on the back of a porch talking. Because there is so much to unpack in the Tignanelli family. It really is, in the Shadowwoods legacy. There is so much to go through. I mean, all the way down to the USA 1. People had seen the stars on the side of that Camaro.
Yeah. That was Bruce Larson. He loved our dad. I still hear from Bruce on Facebook from time to time, because somebody will have a picture of his car there, and I'll make a remark like, "Yeah, that one was painted at the Sunoco station," and he always replies. But he loved Dad, and he was such a great guy, a real gentleman. I mean, they were all great guys. I don't remember a bad experience, but that stripe down the side, it was Sutton Chevrolet, I think he used to have on the side of it.
Right.
But down that whole stripe, it had these big stars in it. And those were all taped. I mean, the stars, the stars got to be perfect.
Yeah.
5-pointer. And Dad taped those, all those stars. Those were all done by hand, and then painted them, and then took the paper off. And it was really cool how he did it. But nowadays, I mean, if we were putting vinyl ones on, we'd be having a hard time making them right. But his were all perfect, and it was, like I said, the Bruce Larson car was always one of our favorites because we watched it. And to tell you the truth, in '76, so this is getting us down to the time a little. Dad painted. We had 3 wreckers and a Bronco with a plow on it,
Right.
and Dad painted them all just like Bruce Larson's car. It's just coming to me now. We had a big blue truck with the stars and that stripe that just like Larson's. We had a red one with that stripe just like Larson's, and we had a white one with that stripe just like Larson's. Dad painted those. Those had Bruce Larson. I never thought of that till this minute.
Ta-da.
So thank you for that. But
The funny thing is, with your car and Tom's car, when you guys drove to like whether high school or whatever, I'm thinking your cars were
very cool.
Painted by your dad?
They were.
Really?
That 56 Ford panel truck was painted Firethorn red, Firethorn gold. It was the new Cadillac colors. And yeah, everything we had. I think Tom's one of Tom's first cars was a black 57 Dodge that didn't come black, convertible. Yeah, and everything we had. Our mom's car too. Dad painted every car we had. We never really had a new car, but.
Does your dad ever like look at these cars and go, needs paint? Yeah, I got an idea for this.
He did.
And he just like, okay, I'll see you in an hour.
We just left him alone. I mean, my mom, she had a Mark III Lincoln that was like a plum color, and Dad wanted it to be all black, and painted it all black, and the car was only a couple years old.
And your mom's cool with this?
Oh yeah, listen, man, whatever he wanted. She always had nice stuff, and but I think everything we had probably got painted. I really, now that you mention it, because we never really had a new car, and whatever we had, it was going to become ours. And so he did everybody's cars. My cousins, everybody had.
I was going to say, I mean, at family gatherings.
Everybody in the gas station was like family. John Cooper had an Ontario Orange '66 Le Mans. That was a Corvette color. Dad put a brown stripe down the side, painted it orange, put a brown stripe on. I think everybody. I'm thinking of them as we sit here. They all got their cars painted.
I mean, did Ditzler come into and knock on the door? I mean, how did your dad get all this paint?
I don't know.
I mean, he just like got up one day, got early in the morning, went down to Painter Supply, came back with like
he
gallons.
Did go there, but I think most of the time what color came on your car was what he had too much of from the last car.
Which brings us back to that one car that had all kinds of stripes and all kinds of...
Ron Mancini driving. We love Ron, great guy. Louis, great guy. His dad, Romolo, and Dan, all great guys. Great family. And, we loved every bit of being with those guys, except when they were next gen at track, and then it was kill or be killed, But, that Zumo was a car that was intended to have like a life expectancy of 90 days.
Because?
Because it was really built to go out to the winter, to the World Finals and beat up the guys that were ahead of everybody in points. It was a murderer. And what a fast car. And Ronnie, great guy, good driver. And so Dad had this car, and the whole thing was intended to be almost humorous. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've seen the picture, probably the transmission that exploded at the World Finals. That's got Tom's foot in the corner. That transmission was probably should have gone one less run. But nobody thought it was going to run forever. And when Ronnie jumped out of that car, I'll take it back to the paint shop. When Ronnie jumped out of that car, he had white crew socks. He always wore those calf-high white socks. Ronnie did. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to wear long pants in those days. You didn't even have to wear a fire jacket. You wore long sleeves, like a.
That was it for your class.
That was it. He had a lap belt, And he jumped out of the car and he had transmission oil all over his legs. His socks were all red, and we thought he was bleeding to death. But it came through the floor. It was just a wonderful explosion.
A wonderful explosion. Yeah, parts all over the place, shrapnels all over the place.
It's really one of the coolest pictures of all time. But that color of that car was, Dad, what color was this car going to be? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to paint it whatever color we got. And so every can that he had painted, of candy color that he had any left went on that car. So it's got this, all good colors, but they look a little weird together. It had a pearl down the center. It had like a plum color on the two sides. It had gold down the end. It had this green, this hoodoo green on the side of it. And then just for the heck of it, in those days, there were some guys putting these like doilies on the side and paint through them, and you get these fancy things. They get one of my ma's old tablecloths.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. This completely destroyed it. The whole side of that Zoom, well, you don't get to see it much in the pictures. On that green, on that hoodoo green, he put a black doily from front to back, and there was no super stock cars like that, but everybody was like, oh man, if you looked at it from this way, it was all right, that way it was all right, but if you looked at it together, it was like, oh my God, what were they thinking? But we didn't care. It was like one of these.
Your dad cleared the shelves.
He did, yeah. It was like the Green New Deal, man. He didn't throw anything away that day, So save the planet or something. But it was so cool because he just kept on going, and next thing you know, hey, hold this there. But that car was really fast.
I mean, of all the stuff, to candy back in the day, it's not like today. I mean, you had to put down primer, then you had to put down your gold or your silver or whatever,
right.
And then you put on your candy color, and then you would have to sand between coats, and depending on how thick you wanted that look.
You really, and if you listen to the old man, you never sanded this way, you sanded this way. Because when you went that way, you left finger marks. So we had to learn to sand this way, never this way.
We had to learn.
Well, we did a lot of the wet sanding.
Oh, really? Oh, boys.
Well, we had a guy standing behind us, slapping us in the head or whatever. But no, I guess he always wanted us to learn how to do it right. But man, that was like, phew, that was verboten, man. If you started going this way with the sandpaper, can't do it.
And how many grit?
Oh, in those days. Now you got 1,000, you got 1,200. I think we were using like 600 was probably the finest.
600 grit.
I think that's the finest that I remember. We had 320, 400, and 600. I know we didn't have anything higher than that.
Ever burned through and you say, Dad?
Tried not to. Even when we would have to wheel them out, and when we would hand rub them, and then we would wheel them out, and those brushes on those big electric motors.
Yeah.
If you got too tight on the corner, I mean, he'd say, stay off the edges because
you'd burn them.
It would, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't think I did that more than once because I knew that was a bad idea.
Because you knew.
Yeah. I can learn. Don't do that. It was better to walk away with a dull spot there. Work on it yourself, Dad. I got it.
What was the hours like at your dad's? Like 6 to midnight?
When he had his gas stations earlier, it was 6 to midnight, and then when we were in the Shadowoods, it was like 6
to midnight.
And he was working. That's why we ate dinner there. I mean, but when we got to Shadowwoods, us kids were old enough to run the place after dinner, and so we closed at 10 o'clock, because we all had to go to school the next day. Plus, we wanted to stop and see some girl on the way home or whatever, But it was 6 to 10.
I mean, did that ever work out for you? I mean, when you're dating, you
Find
go,
a girl
hey.
on the way home?
No, I would just like say, look, your car looks a little pale. Why don't you bring it over to the shop, see what we can do for you.
I remember fixing some. Well, yeah, it was a good way to get a second date.
What an icebreaker.
Yeah. I had all kinds of used tires behind the place, used batteries. I mean, I never threw anything away. I was like a little junkyard back there, and somebody bought 4 tires and 2 were pretty good. Those other 2 were going to be sitting here, and we'll find somebody for them. And we're just trying to get by.
Well, evidently, look at how many, not only race royalty came by.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird because in the 70s, you should have known that, Bruce Larson and Merle Downey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These were names that you saw in Hot Rod Magazine, Carcraft, whatever.
Yep.
And it's like, but to you, they're just like, hi, Jim, what's new? Hey, want a Pepsi?
It really, you're right. I mean, as I look back now, I always knew it was cool, but as I look back on it now, I think that it was more fortunate than I knew. But actually, they treated us like, they thought we were okay. I was in the 1973 Carcraft Center spread. What the heck? But
Okay.
No, the car was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't want you to get.
Woohoo!
Yeah. No, but we were good on our own, but they were these fueler guys, blown up guys, and stuff like that. So, they would get a lot more of that, but they watched us race too. They were our friends.
Did they ever bring you a car that just got destroyed and told your dad, hey, can you fix it?
Yeah, they knocked the front end off them, wheel wobble or something like that, and crack. The bodies were heavier then. They were all fiberglass.
Yeah, real fiberglass.
Yeah, and there was not a lot of good fiberglass guys, and Dad could glass anything. And
let me guess, without gloves and
yeah, it was terrible.
and have all those little fiberglass shreds.
It was terrible.
Lord.
I mean, I didn't even like sweeping the stuff up, but he was right in there head first, man. And but he would do. I remember one time he did. We had Mongoose and McEwen's car in there, and I think Mongoose's car was white, and I think McEwen's car was yellow.
What year is this?
Mid-70s, probably.
Okay, so Prudhomme was white and... No, it'd be just opposite, wouldn't it be?
I think he had a Pepsi car or the Army car.
Okay, so the Army car should have been
white.
Yeah.
And I think McEwen, so I said it the wrong way, but I remember they would get holes in them, like they would, because of the tracks, we didn't have pristine racetracks and stuff, so they'd go along and a stone would go through the fender, that would get caught in a tire and it would do damage, or they'd get a little wobble on it and crack the fenders and stuff like that, and Dad could just, literally in a day, he would get through those cars. And so he became, they would save their problems for that week at Shadowoods,
And great. And then you would see these flatbed trucks just pull up. You had a nice sized parking lot, but it didn't have enough to put in big trucks and stuff.
No, but everybody was towing in chaparral trailers in those days. Matter of fact, early on they had those ones you drove on the back.
Little wedges, yeah.
And we had one of those too. Tom built the back end on it, and a little produce truck, 2-speed rear end. I remember that. It was kind of cool to drive. And we had the first semi, I really think we did have the first semi that went to the racetrack.
Really?
Yeah, it was an old A.J. Foyt trailer, and we had first a Dodge, what a dog that was, a cab.
What?
And then, it wasn't turbocharged, it only had 10 speeds. I remember driving it to Gainesville, and if you were going up the hill, and like Tennessee didn't have I-75 yet, and if you missed a gear, you had to stop and start over. I don't care where you were at. So we did that for 1 year, and then we bought a used Peterbilt. It was a 72, and used the same trailer and had 2 cars in the back. I remember we towed Dick LaHaye's trailer all the way to Gainesville with the snout hanging out the back of the trailer. Well, it was actually the Shadowoods top fueler, but Dick LaHaye was going to drive it. And I know I had the first one to pull into my line because I knocked every wire in the building down, in the whole property down. And we pulled in, and I was really proud of myself. And all of a sudden, everybody's yelling, and man, it was a 13-foot trailer. The wires were supposed to be 15, and apparently the memo they had was there 12, and I knocked the whole place out. But
and how long did you knock Milan out of business for?
Well, I don't know. My biggest fear was that those were 16,000 volts, but they were all telephone wires. They didn't mean anything. So, but I was sitting in the truck and saying, I ain't touching nothing, man. I didn't want to get blown up here, but. I don't think.
Was that a phone call to your dad?
No, he was probably there. Him and Meyer would come. They all followed us around. But that was Cliff Riley, great guy, great family that ran the track in those days.
Milan,
yeah, it was just. They were mad, but I think we raced before the day was out. Maybe missing a few lights. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, how do you explain that? It's like my truck hit some of your wires.
Well, I explain it by saying those wires are supposed to be 15 feet up, and this is a 13-foot trailer.
You're lucky we don't sue.
Yeah. I hope you didn't damage my truck with that electric wire there or whatever it was, telephone wire.
What car was in the truck that you were racing?
The 63 and the 64 Plymouth, the 2 sedans. Wow. Great cars. Well, man, when you pulled in with that, I drove both of them, one automatic, one stick, and it was a lot of fun, but it was, you had to kind of think of what you're doing,
So this was in the 70s, right?
Yeah, 71.
I'm trying to think, going back to the Shadowwoods, so your dad's there kind of by himself then, right now? He doesn't have the little labor?
Oh, yeah, no, he was the body man, that was it, yeah.
And then somebody would have to, because it was still a business, still had to pump gas.
Well, that was Joe. We had Uncle Joe who ran a gas station. We had Uncle Ernie did the brake jobs and the engines, and we had Dad in the body shop.
Wow, because the cool
brothers.
thing about Shadowwoods is my recollection was you could see the glass doors.
It was all glass, yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of so futuristic looking.
And it had that little bit of a V to it.
Yeah.
And that was just because of the nature of the driveway and the property, but it was, I still, and again, I'm going to attribute a lot of this to you guys, but I'll be at places and guys will say, I remember riding my bike up there just to see what you were doing through the window. And these are 50, 60, 70-year-old guys now talking to me. And, and I would drive my dad's car up there just to buy Sunoco gas just so I could see what you guys were doing. And,
well, because it was so cool. I mean, you guys were like the race gas station.
Yeah.
Because Sunoco at the time, it was what your station was.
Yeah.
I mean, it sold whatever 260 was.
260 action, man. That was it. And people bought they could get 260 at any Sunoco station, but it's like they thought if they bought it at Shadowoods, it was
like
different.
261?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people came there, a lot of trucks and, with their trailers and stuff like that. I don't know. They just did.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like if you were a musician and you had to get your guitars restrung, you would go to the place where the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were hanging out, because somehow, some way,
Somebody's got to look at your stuff, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, it's to the point where, if you're getting a tank full of 260, and at the time, it was an unusual thing that Sunoco, and I think it was only Sunoco, they had like 12 different blends that you
custom
could
blended.
get.
You had 190 and 260, and everything you put in was a blend of one or the other.
Yeah, so you would have like different octane levels, and there was like
cool.
10 different octane levels. You'd have the economy 190 for whatever reason, and then 260 was in the hundreds,
104,
wasn't it?
I think, maybe.
104.
I think it was 104.
From the pump.
Yeah.
24 cents a gallon.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Holy. And then they had like the little number thing on the side, and you just, there you go.
Yeah, in the middle, you had 190 to 260. You had like 210, 220, 230, 240, and then there's something in the middle was a blend apparently. And actually, I have to tell you, I used to climb up on the truck and make sure that we were getting full loads of fuel. That was part of my deal. And when they would have a truck that would have all 260 and a truck that would be all 190. And they did go into 2 tanks. And apparently that blending thing did work because we use that gas in our cars. But it really did blend. It wasn't a joke.
But why would you need 230?
Oh, your old man's Volkswagen, man. I don't know. You put some 260 in you cook it. So yeah, there was something for everybody.
Yeah, considering that back in the day, I mean, that's when all the V8s were coming out of Detroit, and you didn't want to have the knock and stuff. I mean, you'd be embarrassed to have 190. Good God.
Really, I think the greatest. And I'm obviously prejudiced, but being my age, I would say from 67 to 72. Was probably the greatest time on earth to be alive. Because think about the music. In the top 10.
We do think about the music at CKiW.
Well, yes, you do. Well, here's a hint for you. Think about this. In any one of those years, you could have the British, you could have the Beach Boys, you could have Motown, you could have Frank Sinatra and Elvis in the top 10. All of them. That doesn't happen anymore. And the girls wore cool outfits. They had short skirts and high shoes and long hair. It was a great time for girls. And all the cars were cool. I mean, 327, 300 horsepower Chevrolets, a Z28. A buddy of mine, Terry Carlson, had a 68 302 Z28, dark green, white stripes. But it was like with all of our cars. I had a buddy with a 390 670 Nova. And we just drove our cars. I mean, those were normal kid cars.
And you would think that next year it's going to get better. And next year, and it kind of actually really did, because, and we're talking about too how we lost generations of people because there was that excitement that was coming. Wait till the 1966 Chryslers will be out in 2 weeks. And then whoop, there you go. And if you could buy a 66 like in November of 65 and you drove it around, and you'd actually take your car to your friend's house, and wow. And then there was, if you had the Mercury over the Ford, you're that one step up, and everything else went on.
Fury to Fury. And
yeah, right. And then, right, even in the Chrysler stuff, I mean, if you had a New Yorker, step back, I mean, you could have a Belvedere all you want, but then again, Chrysler got hip to the point, I mean, all the way down to the Roadrunner, where they gave you a big slab of a car.
Took a cab and put a big motor in it.
Yeah.
And sold every one of them.
Yeah, and the crappy thing was what held everything back was the insurance. Because the insurance was crazy. Gas wasn't crazy. Fill up your tank for $4 at 260.
That's why they lied about the horsepower. That's why a 446 barrel car said 390. Because if it was 400, the insurance went up. That's why a 426 Hemi said 425 horse. There ain't no way those cars were. Those cars were monsters. And, you know, in the Chevrolet, they'd have a 327 300, 327 350.
Yep.
And
375, yeah.
so everybody lied about the horsepower. I mean, it made sense. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to afford to drive them. But insurance was probably like $300 a year or something.
And well, considering you made $100 a week, maybe,
Yeah,
you know, if
sure.
you're a professional person.
A couple bucks an hour and working your ass off.
Yeah, but then again, you look at some of those ads, you know, Plymouth Superbird, $2,999, you know, and you go, oh, I'd buy one. Yeah, well, considering you made $100, you made $400 a month, and that's for home, food, kids, everything else, you know.
We probably would have bought more of those Superbirds if we could got them in the garage. You know, they were too long and they were too high. You couldn't, you know, in Detroit, man, you know, the first UFO was actually built at the gas station, but was stored in our garage on Rossini Drive in Detroit. And, you know, if we were changing leaf springs, lowering the front end, it was done in the backyard. And, but, you know, that one would fit in the garage. But, you know, then our dad made that funny front end. You ever see that funny front end?
We better talk about this too. For folks, everybody knows that we have this affinity for Superbirds, just do. You know, I think the finest car ever. Easy riding, plenty of room for 5.
It was made for a purpose.
Nice AM.
Yeah, made for a purpose.
That funny front end that you saw in it, everybody goes, well, it's kind of like, you know, Chrysler trying to make a pseudo Corvette kind of look, because they thought that you would split the wind this way, because aerodynamics back in the day was really rudimentary, you know.
Yeah, they were just trying to close in the sides of the bumpers in those days. Was a big deal. You know?
Yeah, because you look at some of these cars, and it's like pushing a barn door.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Fatso.
Yeah, right. But then they had, you know, with the Superbird and all that stuff, yeah. You know, it's like if you could have had one of those things, but the front end of the Superbird, it had that really funny kind of cone nose, and that, you know, everybody thought,
headlights in it too.
yeah, and it split the wind and stuff. Now, do you think somebody from down in Chrysler land, down in Highland Park, put that together, kids? No? You want to know where that first nose came from? Q Jim.
Well, was they were well, Tom was working at the Woodward Garage. I mean, you got
and we got a whole lot of that coming, so hang on, folks.
You got to know what a thrill that was, and such wonderful people. I mean, all good guys. But when Tom got in a car wreck with the Charger, the UFO Volume 2, the Charger flip-top body, we were at National Trail for Division 3 points race in Columbus. And in those days, I drove the truck, and we had a Ford tilt cab, really primitive truck, but cool. Kind of glad it gave us a Cobra Jet motor for it, and it was pretty fast for a big boat. We'd drive the car in the back of it. Well, I would sit at the finish line, and Tom would race, and then that would give us an opportunity to go after him, because we were going to have to pull him back. And when he went by me, the parachute came out. This was the first race of the year for us with that car in 1969. Yeah, May of 69. Parachute came out, went right down on the ground. You know, just had the wrong length. Something, it just didn't operate the way it was. It was the wrong one for the car, I guess you might say. And he went down, and we saw it. I'm trying to chase after him, because he only had 2 rear wheel brakes in those cars in the time.
Real brakes? Wow, real.
And, you know, yeah, it was when it's a handbrake. And it was clear he wasn't going to stop. But at the end of that track, which is relatively short, they had a fence across the end and a guardrail across the end. And there were kids sitting on the top of it watching the races.
Children, move.
Yeah, they had no idea what they
Move quick.
And at the last second, he pulled hard to the left, went off into a field. I could see the car disappear, grass going. And then he hit a tree that was about this high. And when it hit, it stopped him immediately. And did all kinds of damage to his vocal cords and things like that, which he's, you know, struggled with. It's become, I guess it's a trait now at this time. But I had to pull him out through the roof on the top, because the car was so bent up I couldn't get the body up. Pulled him out through the top. I had one buddy with me, and you know, took him to the hospital. Mom and Dad were still on their way down. We towed the car back. A bunch of people helped me. I remember we poured rear end dope on the rails. Well, it was the only, we had no front end. So we poured rear end dope on it, and we got a bunch of guys, and we had a pretty primitive cable. We pulled it up on the truck. There's pictures of that around. So many people have shown me on Facebook. Anyway, when we came back, it was the first race of the year. Dad had heard about the Superbird idea, and he made a snout. And it's the most perfect one you've ever seen. You see the car.
Expect no less.
You can see the car, but it was all done with like balsa wood, styrofoam, cardboard, and he put that on the old body and matched that paint up. And I swear to God, people thought it was like a brand new body. But all he did was put basically the Superbird snout on it, and it was magnificent. And that car went about 5 miles an hour faster with that.
I was going to say, I mean, what came
difference.
first, before the Superbird nose or this nose?
Which one?
But the UFO nose, I mean, with the little blunt stuff.
Oh, that was the 67 car, so the 65 Plymouth. So that one with that gold front end on
right,
it,
yeah.
that was Dad doing that in 66.
And so
that was on the ultra wheelbase car.
So if you know what the front end of a Superbird looks like,
oh yeah,
there's a kind of a
sure, I see what you're saying.
bastardization.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's like somehow Highland Park went, hey.
You know, I think I think that is a story. It really is.
Because you could see that the front end was that your dad made. I shan't say it was crude, but it wasn't. It doesn't look like something that came out of like a factory. But it was everything there. It was that same kind of blunt nose.
You're right.
It was that little attachment to the front.
Well, you know, he's an old airplane pilot, and everything that we had on all of our cars was about aerodynamics and weight. Lighter and less wind resistance was the goal. Yeah. And so that car was actually a good-looking car with a grill on it. We got a nice picture of it here. But Dad said, man, it's like driving a brick through a wall here. We got to do something. And he made that in our yard, man. I mean, it was
cardboard.
It was. Yeah, it really was.
Cardboard tape.
Yeah.
Paint.
Cardboard, plywood, balsa wood. And it was. The first few times we ran it was red primer. You still see some pictures of that out there. And everybody was like, what the heck is that? I mean, it was, you had to like it to admire it because it was not attractive. But now you don't think that even the Superbird was attractive to everybody.
No, you either loved it or hated it.
Yeah, so I think when we drove in with that, everybody was like, but see, Tom ran that car in what was called B altered or in B experimental stock, which was before the funny cars. You know, the older
B experimental stock.
Yeah, it was like a car like this, hopped up a little bit.
How did they go experimental stock when it had a whole different front nose?
Well, that's when I think that might be when it went to
experimental.
That's when it became B-haltered, I think, probably. But he ran that in Comp Eliminator, and he won a national championship with it. I mean, it was a Division III knockout, and we towed him all the way to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Dad and I actually towed him out there. That is a story in itself, man. Some guy passed me up and knocked my West Coast mirror off of that Ford truck. Dad was sleeping. I know I didn't have a driver's license yet. And we were in the...
Seems to be a theme here.
We were in Missouri. We were in the Ozarks, the Ozark Mountains, the old Route 66, you know. And before there was an Interstate 40, and this guy drove by me. The trucks would go down the hills to pick up speed for the next hill. You know, when he went by, he hit the mirror, and when the lag bolts came out of the door, it was like an explosion, you know, like the bone, you know, like a drum beat. Yeah. Dad woke up, and he said, what happened? I said, I don't know. I didn't know the mirror was missing. I thought it just was dark.
You couldn't see it.
I thought it was dark. I said, I don't know. And he says, what happened? I said, I think that guy hit us. And he said, go get him. And I chased that guy
in the truck?
I did. I chased that guy down. Dad, guess there's a statute of limitations. I know he jumped out of the truck before that guy even knew we were behind him. Dad climbed up on that thing and opened that door up. He had a knife sticking in that guy's neck. And I was like, and I'm like, oh man, this isn't good. And I think he worked the guy for like $50 or whatever it was. He was so mad at the guy. And that door had such a big piece of Bondo in it that when it popped, the Bondo, this thing went, and it was awesome. But yeah, the old man, he was like a freaking Olympic runner. When running across that parking lot, I'm going, oh man, now what's going to happen? He climbed. That guy had no idea he was coming. He opened that door up and he put that knife, so knife you probably couldn't poke a hole in a piece of bread with it. Good thing, I guess. And anyway, that's just that
way to go, Dad, your hood.
we're from Detroit and we mean business, you know. So, but we were taking Tom's car out there to Tulsa, Oklahoma for the World Finals. That's where they were. Both years that Tom was in the World Finals, 66 and 67, they were at Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So this, I was going to say, so this goes back to what we say. You know Shadowoods. If you don't know Shadowoods, you do know Shadowoods. Because of or the Tignanellis or Tom or Jim, because these things, if you did see a front end of a Superbird, if you saw the front end of a Daytona,
yeah, I guess you're right.
Years earlier, this was built on a front lawn with cardboard, balsa wood, and paint, and you'll see the car, and it's the UFO. Oh no,
that was the UFO, the ultra wheelbase car. Yeah.
Because they had the UFO, and then they did they have the UFO, and then like little down time wise, then they put the nose on because
the first year that was a '65 Plymouth. Constructed in say '65, probably raced a couple times as like a super stock car, but I think just for heck of it.
Yeah.
It was always intended to be an ultra wheelbase car, and then they did the ultra wheelbase car, and he raced it in '66. Probably between '66 and '67, the old man decided we got to do something different, and he made that nose. And so probably '67, when we went to the World Finals, it probably would have had that on. I'm sure it did.
And that was legal to run
in altered class, yeah.
Because it was an experimental class.
Yeah. It didn't run in super stock. You know,
yeah,
remember, this is an older wheelbase car. So, I mean, there's nothing normal about it.
But what else were you running? I mean, who were you running against kind of cars?
All those guys had older wheelbase cars. I mean,
but nobody had a front nose.
No.
You know,
I mean, that's why you have one. You know, you can run right behind the leaders, or you can try to pass them. You know, and that was.
But didn't it overheat? I mean, that was kind of the big knock for it. Because I don't remember seeing like a big hole or anything.
There was no hole. It was completely shut off. It was just, and you know, in those days we didn't have like these cars with electric water pumps and electric fans. It just meant you had to don't dilly-dally around.
Hurry up stage and get going.
Yeah.
You know, and talking about this, of everything that was going on with all this, here comes again another 6 degrees. Your brother Tom, you know, I mean, he worked. I mean, he wasn't just somebody that pushed the broom.
No, he was he continues to be very talented, but no, he was right in the hot seat there. He was a test driver.
There was back in the day, you know, I hate to do this, but Chrysler had this swinging little garage, whether you call
Woodward garage.
Yeah.
Woodward and Buena Vista, Highland Park.
It was kind of like a skunk works in the wide open. Now, you had talented people like, and the story goes, it was Roger Lindemood went on to do something else, and that had a opening that they hired
Transmission
Tom.
lab, yeah.
You know, and so you think, at one time, because that was when Hoover was there, right?
Tom Hoover, Al Adams. I don't know, I'd have to think of some of their, Tom Hoover was the guy in charge. Al Adams was the chemist, the weatherman, great guy. I love that guy.
Your brother, and then at one time Lindemood, at one time, yeah, you're right. I'm trying to think of Tom Hoover and all these other guys that were just incredible when it came to high performance, and it was just like your mouth dropped with the stuff that they were doing and what they were doing at this little garage.
Ted Spehar was in there. Ted Spehar was an engine guy.
Yeah, Ted Spehar, right, absolutely.
I love Ted. I mean, he still lives up in northern Macomb County. No, it was, you know, I was younger at that time. I was like 15, 16, 17, and I would go to the test days, and I'd get to, you know, goof around and go to the Woodward garage. And the Woodward garage, as I recall, was an old Pontiac dealership, and they had painted all the windows on the inside black.
Nobody thought, hey, maybe we should look in here?
It was like an abandoned building. And all the Winston Cup cars, all the NASCAR guys were all on one side, and all the drag race guys were over here. And what I remember, it was that the drag race guys were so technically perfect compared to the NASCAR guys, which I think the NASCAR guys caught up. Probably when Kenny Bernstein and Raymond Beadle got into NASCAR, I think they forced everybody to make good fittings and stuff. But in those days, you know, they hammered on everything, and then the drag race cars were over here. And Tom ran the Woodward garage, Barracuda, which is That's the old clone over here, or whatever you want to call it. What do they call it? The mule. And that's what he did for them. And I always make fun of some of these guys, and sometimes they don't find it that humorous. But when I would get and watch Tom do this, and he's a great mechanic, and he would take the car and he would go to Detroit Dragway. That's where they tested around here. And then once in a while they'd be on the West Coast, and he'd be gone for a while. But he would make 3 passes. And Al Adams was doing the weather, and Tom Hoover was doing this. And these guys were actually brilliant engineers, but to me they were just cool guys. And Tom would go down there, and then he would change the camshaft. Tom would change the camshaft. Nobody ever touched the car but him. Change the carburetors, change the camshaft, change the timing, all those things that he did. And there was somebody there to make note of everything. And then that information went to Ronnie Sox, Dick Landy, Butch Wheel, all the Chrysler factory guys. And
this is before the internet too.
Oh yeah, you were using pencil and paper.
Yeah, I mean quickly, because if you guys were testing in Woodward, getting out to the West Coast to say, hey, look, we got this new cam grind. We think this is the way you go. Yeah. There was a little bit of, unless you sent telegraphs.
Yeah. No, it was. That's what he did, and Tom was the guy who changed torque converters, and he was the mechanic on the car and the driver. And then he would put all of that stuff together for these guys, and some of them, like I said, some of them probably don't appreciate it, but I'd say to them, man, listen, a lot of your success came out of that car, because you didn't know what the hell you were doing. I mean, you were driving a great car, which, listen, I don't know what the hell I'm doing either. I'm driving great cars. But I can tell you that those guys got a significant amount of their skills, I won't say their skills, their success was based on having really good stuff, which they deserved. And you can't make a fast car with a slow driver. But
says Jim.
Well, I guess you can. So when you look at it with those guys, when they got the information, they knew what the weather was, where we were doing it. They knew all these things. And then what their duty was is do exactly what they were told. And their cars were fast. And they didn't have to make 3 passes and say, maybe we should crank up a little of this or a little of that. They had information. And it all came out of that car and came out of, like I said, I'm not giving all the credit to Tom. He probably was doing what he was told. But I can tell you that he did it perfectly. And then the information he did and the way he drove the cars, if you don't do it the same way, what changed? And he was very talented at that, and on those cars. And in the Woodward garage, that's where if you look at that Barracuda, I actually have a die cast around here somewhere that I found miraculously. But it says Woodward garage on a quarter panel, down on the bottom. That's all it says. And the one picture that I have of it, it's got white wall tires on the front. And you know why? Because they took them off of a Chrysler Imperial that was at the drag strip to see if putting on this size tire would make a difference. It's a white wall. I swear to God, I have the picture of it. And
it's amazing. That's kind of where you notice that Chrysler had that big spurt of they were invincible at the drag strip, pro stock and stuff like that. You couldn't beat them because they had the Woodward garage. I mean, I'm sure Ford and Chevrolet had whatever. But I mean, Chrysler had Tom and those teams constantly running, constantly refining, because whatever won on Sunday, you bought on Monday kind of thing. And so it behooved Corporation Chrysler, to have these guys, and have the mysterious silver bullet, whatever the GTX was, or whatever the hell that was. I mean, if folks go, well, there's only one, and they'd actually take these cars out to Woodward, and test them.
We built one of those too. He built one of those. It was a murder weapon. Great car.
He built a GTX?
No, he built a Roadrunner. But before I go there, but it's a unique story.
We like unique stories.
I think the reason that you saw that success in that Woodward garage was they wanted to win. Mm-hmm. And you had Highland Park Chrysler, Dearborn Ford, Warren GM. So you saw these guys every day. It's not like you're racing some company out of the West Coast. Like these guys went to the same places. They sat at Joanne's on 8 Mile Road and drank whiskey together. But I wanted to tell you how much I kicked your butt. And so these guys that were the engineers, the Tom Hoovers and these guys, these are great people. And they couldn't ignore each other. You couldn't hide from them. It's not like you're in New York and I'm in L.A. and I don't have to answer the phone. We eat in the same place. And so there was this real competitive nature, and I think that was part of the enthusiasm for the automotive stuff at that time was they were all here, and I'm going to beat the Ford, I'm going to beat the Chevy, I'm going to beat the Dodge, whatever. And but that Woodward, that Detroit driveway, I was blessed as a kid to be able to go out there and watch these guys and watch my brother and the things that they did. And then when we didn't get to watch drag racing on Fox Sports on those weekends. We had to go there. A lot of times we were going there. Tom was still competing. But when we went there, we knew why we were winning. I say we because that was us, And when you think about it, we were excited. We built some intakes for Holly for a NASCAR team one time, and I ground them with a die grinder, Tootsie Rolls, and God, it was the worst thing you could ever want to do for yourself. And that was, that car was the fastest at Daytona that year. Actually, went 200 mile an hour.
What year is this?
I think like '84 was a Monte Carlo with the good front end but the small back window. And you can YouTube it. You can see Cale Yarbrough comes out of turn 4 and the car just goes like in outer space, just takes off.
Whoops.
And but it was fast, and we were all watching.
It was fast, but it didn't keep on the ground.
And it really wasn't even. Tom probably perfected an idea, but I'd say Junior Johnson was the one that wanted this done. He came all the way to Holly in Warren, which Tom built all the dyno engines on. And when Junior Johnson wanted this intake done, he had this idea, and he didn't want anyone else to know. And so this guy, which was a good friend of Tom's, Anton, says to Tom, I need you to do this, but it's got to be top secret. So we took it to the gas station. I put coveralls on. Oh my God, grinding aluminum and magnesium with the steel grinder is, man, it's noisy and it's ugly.
You went to the gas station to have this done?
Yeah. It was
while
done,
your dad was painting.
It was done. Yeah, what a mess. I had a big vacuum there just sucking this stuff up, but it was nasty.
Why didn't Tom do it?
Because he knew how nasty it was going to be.
Okay.
I was stupid. But I remember we started cutting the tops off of intake manholes and doing everybody's after that. But Junior had the only one at NASCAR, at least for one race.
I mean, how did they get a hold of you?
Holly, right through Holly Carburetor, because everybody had Holly carburetors on the NASCAR guys.
Right.
And he went to Holly, said, I want to do this. That's my understanding of it. Okay. And then it ended up coming back. That guy knew that if it was done at the gas station, nobody would know.
Now, we should probably talk about the baffling in oil pans.
Yeah, windage
6
strike.
degrees of Tom. Here we go, kids. Ready?
Yeah, that was him. Yeah. Actually driving probably that Woodward Garage Barracuda. And as these cars got to where they left harder and maybe even lifted the front wheels, we didn't have a lot of wheel standing cars in those days because we didn't get to do burnouts. And we didn't really have anything but fancy shock absorbers and leaf springs. So the cars that left perfectly, they maybe take the tire up this much. But and this was really Tom's idea. I mean, and I think that's well documented. He took an oil pan from the car and put it between the two front seats, the bucket seats, and filled it up with motor oil, the number of motor oils, and marked where it was at, and ran 2 passes. And when he came back, they could see where all the oil was at, all the way down the racetrack. And the oil pickup was in the front, where the deep part of the pan was. But all the oil, because of the momentum, was all in the back of the pan. And they couldn't figure it, nobody thought about it. And Tom showed him, he literally put an oil pan between the seats, ran the car, there's where the oil's at. So then they made this windage tray that had these baffles in it to keep the oil from sloshing back and forth, which they still use today.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of variations of that, and that's all because, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, that really was him. I mean, he's a very smart guy, and I would say one of the reasons, and this, I just continue to be bewildered by why you even want to talk to us, because all those years that we were out there, we probably would have been more well-known and more successful, or at least had sponsorships.
Listen closely.
Except that my brother wanted to beat the guys he was working for. And so we always, like, it's sort of like, I give you the perfect one, and it ain't quite perfect. And a lot of times it was just an idea that he had. He did it the way they wanted it done. Chrysler said, you should do this, this, and this. And Tom would be the guy that would walk back and say, this is really how he would be. And he would say these things to me, like I understand it. He would say, you know what, if this was here or this was there, it would be better. And that was our dad talking through my brother. That was how the old man always was. If you just did this, think about what would happen. And it was pretty like a technical guess without having any information. Because everything you did, you had to do the hard way. And yeah, at that time, like I said, we had chances to get sponsorships and stuff like that. And but he just refused to tell this car here, well, at the McCann show in 2018, its 50th anniversary, there were guys wanting to crawl around the bottom of that car, and that's the first time that he's ever let anybody look underneath the car. And it's still better than a lot of the new cars. It's technically different. And these were things that he did, and but we never let anybody. Literally, that car was 50 years old before he let anybody. And he was sitting there. I said, "Come on, dude." Bucky Hess was the guy. What a nice kid, West Virginia. Can I crawl under the car? I looked at Tom. I says, "We're not going to race the car. Who gives a shit? Let the guy look." And I don't know, he must have been hungry because he said, okay. It's really the only time I get a break. And the guy crawled under that car for an hour, and when he came out, I says, listen, man, if I ever hear you say anything about anything, we're going to kill you. And he said, why would I tell anybody?
Really? Yeah, I just got all this new information.
He says, there's stuff done under that car that it's never been done to my car, and it's 50 years newer. It's 50-year newer version. And but that was, if we did anything, and I wouldn't change it, but I think he in particular would have gotten his notoriety many, many, many years ago. We got notoriety because our cars looked cool and we won a lot of races. Mm-hmm. But we never were. He was never want to talk about anything, and he would never let anybody near anything. And it was because he was trying to beat the guys that he was helping. And you can't really. So we didn't. You've heard people call me. I was. What do you call it? When you don't know, when you say you don't know, it's, I don't know, some kind of a term.
Plausible deniability?
Yeah, that's what they call me. He never went to tech with this car. He never was standing anywhere within 100 yards of this car.
How did you race if you didn't tech?
Well, I teched it.
Oh.
And I had the plausible deniability. They'd come in and they say, like these Zeus fasteners in the side, nobody's ever had those before or since. And probably because they really didn't need to. But they'd say to me, what are those in there for? I don't know. I got no clue. Well, where's Tom at? I don't know. And every car went through tech with me. Usually, sometimes he wouldn't even be there at the racetrack that day. And
that's plausible.
Yeah. And listen, most of the time I didn't know. Okay, I didn't need to know. But if I did know, I wasn't telling anybody because then he'd kill me. He did a lot of cool things, and there's a lot of cool things on that car. It's still a very, very cool car, and that 65 roller wheelbase car is going to be a very, very cool car.
Which it kind of, and again, we bounce around with the Shadowoods team right now. What's happening is in 2023, this year, you're going to be campaigning Fatso.
Yes.
And then after Fatso, there is UFO 3 in the makes.
Something like that. Kind of. Yeah. It's going to be painted like this, though. We're not going to UFO it, but we have this kind of a neat thing that Elliot, who we mentioned earlier, designed. In the middle of the night, we were trying to think of what could we put on this car that would tie the two together. And I don't know, in the middle of the night, when I do my best thinking, I guess, or if anything at all, I thought about Area 51 in the UFOs, the old place in Nevada where they say everything is hidden. And I thought, well, we're bringing this thing out of hiding, And so we got it from Area 51, and so we've got a little thing on the side of the roof that Elliot drew up, and it says UFO in the background, and it's got like a military stamp, like with a stencil.
Yeah.
And it says Area 51, and it says revisited. And so that's gonna be the tie-in between it's gonna be painted up like these cars. Matter of fact, most of it's painted already. But that's gonna be Area 51 revisited, and that's a tingle back to our dad. Mom's the one that called it a UFO. And
Your mom did, and so she got naming rights?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, matter of fact, I probably owe her a little bit. But yeah, she was the car namer, and the 63 Plymouth that he first drove was called Goldenrod, because she really liked gold. It was the same color as her 65 Pontiac, so it became Goldenrod. That was a one-year deal. But then the UFO, she said, oh man, that looks like a UFO. And boom, there it was. So the UFO.
And so Zumo, was that her?
No, that was Ronnie. I got to give credit to that one. Ronnie Mancini used to say that all the time. It was a word that he used, like, man, Zumo. I don't know where it came from, but that was Ronnie. And he drove the car. And it says Mancini and Tignanelli on championship engines on it. So Tom was the engine builder. Ronnie, a great engine builder too, but that was really, I guess you'd say Tom's half of the business. But Ronnie was always intended to be the driver of that car. And that was a word he used, and I don't even know, you'd have to check with him or Louie, his brother, but he always says Zumo, and so that's what was put on the door. I mean, it just fit because nothing fit. The colors were weird, everything was weird on it, and we're going to put Zumo. I don't know what it meant. It was Ronnie.
There's folks that were saying, look, you guys had all this firepower. You're right there on Gratiot. Arguably one of the top 3 street racing roads in this part of Michigan. I mean, Woodward, Telegraph kind of, but really around here it's Woodward, Gratiot.
Yeah.
Gratiot being more of a Mopar town for I don't know why, and then Woodward being that what it is. I mean, how much did you guys see coming out of Shadowoods, Sunoco? I mean, did folks, I would assume somehow, some way you guys had to do some carburetor testing late at night.
Oh yeah. No, see, Gratiot by us, the Roosevelt cops were our friends. I mean, they were on our place all the time. At one time my dad drove that alcohol burning sprint car on 15 mile with Clinton Township had the road blocked off. I mean, I know he was over 100 mile an hour. I thought actually somebody said they had him on the radar at 130. I can't believe that. I think the car would have flown away, but I don't know. But yeah, no, we weren't criminals. We were just guys.
Street racers.
And most of the cops, they had cool cars, or they'd sit in the driveway and do radar on Gratiot while
make money.
They'd be sitting in our place watching us do things. We had great relationships with all of the local cops, so we could pull out. I mean, I had this car here out on Gratiot a couple of years ago, up and down. The cops were sitting down at Harrington and down here, and just how long are you gonna be? I don't know, a few minutes till it gets hot. We beat the heck out of it on Gratiot. Nobody gave us any trouble.
Yeah, but folks kind of know what your second job is, so it's not like you work at the foundry at Ford.
I do have some friends there.
Yeah, a little bit.
But we drag raced on Gratiot all the time. I mean, it was half a mile here, quarter mile here.
Best place to go?
Well, on Gratiot?
Yeah.
Probably like 10 and a half mile. There was no 696 then, 10 and a half mile, because the road, it got a little darker there, like there was more lights down here. And Groesbeck was where they had the daily drive-in, and daily drive-in was like the old, like if you watch the old movies, Hollywood Nights was one of those drive-ins. And Groesbeck was dark, dirty, rough, and nobody went faster but us. I mean, you turn north off 8 Mile, there was the daily drive-in, we'd pull out, we'd race. There was no half-mile red lights there, so you could go. And then we come back and, make fun of each other. Groesbeck was such a terrible street, but nobody else was there. Groesbeck
was really industrial, still is.
Still is, but it was only 2 lanes wide at the time. 2 lanes each direction, but it was really just there was no shoulders. I mean, it was muddy and dirty and crummy, and a great place to go race. But we talked a little bit about Woodward. You'd be hard pressed not to to talk about Ted's Drive-In in Square Lake and Woodward, which was in the late 60s. I think it was probably where, other than Van Nuys Boulevard with Big Willie, Square Lake and Woodward was drag race central, street race central. And he built a car, it was a 68 Roadrunner. I don't know how to tell this story well. Who cares, I guess. Nobody's going to watch this, right? So,
No, not many.
yeah. We had a guy, his name was Bob Winters.
Okay.
And Bob Winters was the guard on 8 Mile and Sherwood on the Warren side, north side 8 Mile. This building is still there. That was the parts depot for Chrysler High Performance. Nothing marked on the building. Big red brick building, looked like an old school building. And Bob Winters was the guard. And he wanted a fast car. And he loved Tom. And he used to go to the drag strips with us. Carried a big pistol. Man, he was a bad dude. This particular day, this happened hundreds of times, or dozens of times, I'll say. I would go down there in my old Chevrolet pickup. I had one like 290,000 miles on it. I bought the
Barely
box
making it.
Oh yeah, I bought the box off of Trading Times. It was the only thing that wasn't full of rust. You go down to 8 and Sherwood, pull in there, and Bob Winters would be at the gate. Hey, how's it going? He'd always act like he didn't know who you were, and I'd say, okay, I gotta pick something. Pull around the back of the building, and a guy in a high-low would come out with a pallet.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't get out of the truck. Plausible deniability. This truck would come out, high-low, dropped his pallet on the back. I had overrides on the rear springs because of these guys. Things sit down. I drive out. Here'd be Bob Winters standing at the gate. He'd have his clipboard, and he'd stand by the truck. And he'd say, okay, you're all set.
Have a good day.
I drive back to the shop. A lot of these pistons, I think a lot of these things you're seeing in here right now are probably came out of one of those pallets. But the idea was to get all the stuff to build Bob Winters a Hemi 4-speed Roadrunner.
Take whatever you guys want as long as it goes in my car.
Yeah, that was in there, and then everything else was just, here you go. And right now we've probably got 6 or 8 sets of aluminum cylinder heads up there, 8's plug and 16 plug, never been out of the boxes. I don't know if they were in there. I'm telling you, I really don't know, but I don't know where else it could have come from. And so, whatever.
Thanks, Chrysler.
They probably had a few things in their garage too. But I would come back, and Tom built this car. It was an acid dipped, but it was a real car. And they sent it up. Chrysler wanted this car to win Woodward Avenue.
So the stories were true.
This was all about the Highland Park versus Warren versus Ford, Dearborn. And so, where can you get it done that nobody will know? Sunoco station, Shadowoods Sunoco. So, all this stuff comes in. They actually acid dipped on all white bodied Roadrunner. As I recall, it had a little bit of a weak spot in the middle of the roof, like it got dunked a little too long. And it had the same bucket seats as this car's got. They came out of a Dodge van. That was because they had
Tradesman A100.
That's it, exactly right. Had one bucket seat. Tom put a roll cage in it. It was tubbed. It had 14 by 32 slicks, same as this car's got. It had super tricks on it, just like this car's got. 4-speed, 426. Probably hopped up a little.
Probably.
I know it was hopped up. I mean, this was a test product in itself. And so there was a guy from GM, and I used to think it was like John DeWarren, but I don't think it was him. But I just know he used to be out there. But somebody from GM was winning with this 69 Firebird 455, whatever, was killing everybody.
Yeah.
The Chevys and the Fords and the Chryslers. So the idea was, we got to beat the hell out of this black Firebird. So we drive it out there. And I'll tell you what was funny. In order to drive it on the street, and believe it or not, they had rules.
You had rules. You had rules to drive it on the street.
You had to have 2 treads around the whole circumference of their tires, the rear tires. We put it up on a hoist with a rat tail file, and I sat in the car and ground two grooves in it. You had to have mufflers. So he took mufflers off of an International Harvester truck, 3-inch in and out, put them on backwards because all the baffles then don't create back pressure. But it's really loud, but it was a muffler. So, one bucket seat, roll cage, blue interior. So I drive it out there. Tom meets me out there. And they want me to drive this car against this whomever.
Not you to drive it.
Yeah. Well, Bob Winters could have never driven this car. He just wanted one, you know. So we go out there, we pull out of the place. Tom comes up to me by the window. I remember like it was yesterday, and he says, "Hey, there's a lot of money here, and these guys got guns."
What?
And he says, I think he said machine guns. Maybe not, but
The word gun does stick in your head no matter which way it comes. Yeah.
And he said, we're betting $500, and I don't have any money. Or I don't have the money, whatever it was, something like that. And I said,
win at all costs.
yeah. And he said, if you lose, just don't come back. I'll find a way home. And if you win, come get me. And you turned east on Square Lake, which was 2 lanes at the time from Woodward. There's a Shell station right here. And a quarter of a mile down was a guy in an El Camino, like a 68 El Camino, with the 4-ways on. And he was the finish line. And when you went around there, a bunch of guys would pull behind you and line up side by side so no cars could come behind you. And then the guy would signal us, and it was like a flag man, take off. And boy, that was probably the most stressful race I was ever in. And
listening hard to the engine.
yeah, I mean, it was, but I won, and it was cool. I mean, he was like there all the time. I kept, I just got there first. And when I came back, we were so freaking excited because we won this $500, and we didn't get killed.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, the machine gun stayed home.
That might have been more important, I guess. But
yeah.
But anyway, that's what we do with that car. And then we brought it back. It went to Bob Winters, and I don't think I ever saw the car again.
So somewhere, somehow, there is a white acid-dipped.
I hope somebody's racing it someplace, but I really don't know. I never saw it again. And I saw Bob Winters. I don't know where the car went. I think he was afraid of it. I don't know what happened to the car. Got parted out. But man, it was fast. It was really fast. We pulled the tires on a street car, pulling the tires. It was really a cool car, and it was fun. And I don't know who was in that black Firebird, but I know everybody there was betting on him, and we won. And it was really fun, though. Really fun.
I mean, if you had great success in that car, why didn't you build another?
Well, we had race cars.
Oh, why do we need another one?
This was just one of those, challenges. It wasn't even a challenge that we made. It was. So he probably did. But
did you go back home and tell your dad?
Oh yeah, he wanted to know how it went. Yeah.
Did you have to cut him in on it?
I didn't get any of it, but that was.
Wait a minute, you drove the car, you didn't get any of it?
I've never earned $1 out of any one of these race cars. It always goes back in the kitty. But I don't know where that money went. Even probably gave it to some gal. I don't know, whatever he did. But
all right, hell of a guy. All right.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's an amazing thing. There is still an incredible amount to go. I mean, we we have to stop here for a moment, but we have so much more to go with the Tignanelli brothers, with the Shadowoods Race Team. Man, I don't even think we scratched the surface, have we?
Well, I thought we dug all the way through it. I got to be home when the streetlights go on, That's what Ma used to say.
I was going to say, I mean, she saw you guys come home. I mean, God love your wash machine, because I'm sure that must have been pretty tricky.
Yeah. Our Ma was pretty different. She used to take our white socks and sew them in our crotch. Because our pants were ripped all the time, and we used to let people say, "Hey, man, your zipper's open." No, that's my Ma. She put like your white sock in there, and Tom's he would tell you this story right now. But she'd sew them, she'd sew an old pair of white socks in there so that you didn't wear out the crotch.
White socks? When everybody had white underwear at the time? Hey, Mom, maybe black sock sometime?
We only had white socks, apparently. I don't know. She was special, man, I mean, she never missed a car race. I mean, she drive to Kentucky, wherever we were at. Never came to like Gainesville or Summer Nationals, but, when we were racing in Kentucky, Ohio, her and her Ma, my grandmother, they made every race. And they were just, everybody knew Connie and Pauline, man. They were just special gals, and they always, want to make sure you ate typical old East Siders, everybody's got to eat. You have your meetings in the kitchen, you never get past the kitchen. But, she drove to all the races, and Pauline, she had flame.
Before I-75, though.
Oh,
I mean, this was not like a highway. You took like whatever little Dick's Highway all the way down.
That's right, yeah, 24 all the way down. But, our grandmother had red hair. I'm sure it wasn't natural, but it was red. And because our grandmother was a hot ticket, and I took her to see Elvis in my '67 Pontiac, believe it or not.
Wow.
And she had on all white fur and had red hair and red lipstick. And I drove her, dropped her off. She went to see Elvis at the Olympia Stadium.
Wow.
And she says, be back here at 10 o'clock. I took off, came back. She walked across Grand River, and I can't tell you what she looked like at the time, but I remember when she got in the car, she was really feeling good about herself. And she says, I said, how did it go? I said, did he wave at you? She says, once he saw me, there wasn't another woman in the place. It was Pauline, just a firecracker, man. Cool broad, sergeant in the Second World War.
Rebuilt handguns.
Rebuilt handguns and rifles for soldiers when they broke down. Got buried with honors. To full shot, folded up flag. I mean, and just a great gal. But my mom was just a younger version of her, not much younger. They were pretty close in age, actually. I think Pauline got pregnant at an early age. But well, you know that story about the Are We on the Right Road?
No, do tell.
We would go to Tri-City on Saturday night, Milan on Sunday, Motor City Sunday night if it was an off weekend. We'd race against the same guys, the Mancinis, the Ted Flax, the Carl Holbrooks, Bill Haynes. We had a great bunch of cars, and we chased each other around, and we all helped each other, but we all wanted to win, And my mom would always, and Pauline would always come to each race and bring pops, bologna sandwiches for the whole
Seems
place.
to be a bologna thing, like fried bologna sandwiches.
Yeah, it's prime rib for a gas station guy. And they would come in and they'd show up, and everybody came to Tignanelli's because Connie was going to be there and make sure everybody ate. It was just how she was. And one particular day, this is a true story, I couldn't make it up. I actually just passed this way the other day. When you go up I-75, it's south of Flint, probably near like DTE Energy Theater, there's a huge picture of Jesus. Huge picture of Jesus with like the glow, around his head. And underneath it, it says, "Are you on the right road?" It's Dixie Baptist Church, I believe. Are you on the right road? And Mom and Grandma were going to Tri-City Dragway on the way to Milan. Not on the way. So my ma was driving up, and they're both, having her gabbing like two broads. My mom passes a sign and it says, "Are you on the right road?" My mom, very Christian woman, loved Jesus, and she says, "No, I'm not." "Am I on the right road?" "No, I'm not." And she looks over at Pauline, and Pauline says, "Where are we supposed to be?" "We're supposed to be going to Milan." And she goes, "Why are we going this way?" "I don't know." Turned around, drove all the way back. You don't have, you don't have cell phones, and you have no way of communicating with anybody. And so we're all like worried about, Mom and Grandma, who could handle themselves, but we thought they got a flat tire or, something weird happened. And when she pulls in, she had a '69 Lincoln Mark III, black, was plum, then black.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, and she pulls in, and here's Pauline, and they get out, and they're all dressed up, they always dressed up sharp. It was a Sunday, but they were coming from church, and my mom says, I said, "Mom, what happened to you? Are you okay?" She goes, "Yeah. We were driving along and talking and laughing, and I saw that picture of the beautiful Jesus, and it said, 'Are you on the right road?' And I went, 'No, I'm not.'" And she says, so they were already 60 miles north instead of 100 miles south, and they just drove in, and it was all, yeah, it happens, one of those deals. That's one of those. That's a Tignanelli story that can't ever be forgotten, whoever your people are that are listening, because you're going to pass that Dixie Baptist Church sign that's sometimes been there. That was probably 60 years ago. The sign was there last week. I saw it. And the next time you go by, you're going to say, am I on the right road? I know you will. I just know you will. Go there today.
And then go to Milan.
But it was just that was just our mom, our grandmother, and it's just another blessing in our life that made you never got upset about anything, because it was like, hey man, it could always be worse. Let's just press on regardless type thing. So anyway, it was good.
An amazing thing. See how this story puts together. This is one of the reasons why we absolutely positively wanted to have as our first in the series. We wanted to make sure that we had the Tignanelli brothers and the Shadowoods thing, because the story is so deep in drag racing and it's affected so many people. And like we said, with the windage trays and stuff, and they're funny stories as you go along, and hell, there's plenty more. So you want to stay tuned here to the only station that gives a damn about the greatest sport on earth, and that's drag racing. Oh, welcome to CKiW, Radio 76.